Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. I'm Trevor Lane. You can find me on Twitter at Trevor_Lane, over on Instagram at Trevor Lane NBA. Joining me is Keith Smith at Keith Smith NBA over on the Twitter machine. Keith, before we dive into all of our news today, there's a question that I've had on the top of my head for the last week or so, and I think it's interesting, and I think it's kind of indicative of this NBA season, how close everything has been. Who is the MVP? And you and I can discuss, but I want to throw it out there to NBA front office viewers. So over on YouTube, let me know in the comments, who is the MVP this season? Because I think you can make an argument for a few different players, and I'm really curious to see what everybody thinks. So in the comments section, let us know, who do you think is the MVP?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's funny. I know you do radio appearances just like I do, and everyone's asking it. Everyone I do now, it's who do you have for MVP? And I'm I don't know. It's where are we at? What day is it? Who played yesterday? What did they do? You can convince me on Jokic, Embiid, or Giannis. It's one of those three for me. All I will say on this, because I don't want to influence anybody's thoughts in the comments, not that it would, but I want to hear from the front. We still going to come up with front office fans, front officers,
That's right.
whatever it is. We're going to come up with a name. So drop that in there too, along with your MVP thought. But I like the idea of, or I don't like the idea rather of anybody who's saying if you have anybody but, you're an idiot.
Yes.
Or you should have your vote taken away. You don't know. No, that's not. This is too close. These guys are all so good. If my guess is, and this is not who I would pick, but this is my guess, is we might see Embiid win it because of voter fatigue.
Yes.
A little bit of Giannis got his, Jokic got his. Let's reward the big guy in Philly. Maybe that's the way this goes, but that's my thought on it.
I think that may be the way it goes, and particularly because there is a little bit of a sentiment out there that Embiid didn't get it last year in part due to injury, and that was a factor. And so then does he get it this year? So, but again, this is one of those ones where if it winds up being Giannis, I'm not going to go say, oh, Embiid was robbed, Jokic was robbed. If it's any of those three, it'll be, yeah, I can see that. I can understand why that guy got it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah. Again, nobody should be yelling about how you're dumb or you can't possibly have anybody else. And it's funny watching as much League Pass as we do too. You pop in on the home feeds on some of these, and they're whether it be for All-Star or award season, they just start pumping their guys, and it's like they want to make you feel bad for thinking anybody else might be good. And it's just no, that's not that. Not to be the old lady from that commercial, but that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works.
In fact, it's one of the great parts about the NBA this season. There's so much parity and so much discussion about who belongs where. So it'll be interesting. But we've got a few news topics that we need to get into, that we need to discuss.
And then we're going to do a full-scale breakdown on the Boston College Eagles first half in the ACC tournament against Pittsburgh, because they're winning at halftime. So that's what everybody tuned in for, right?
When I go into the YouTube analytics and I see when everybody stopped listening or viewing, I'm going to be like, oh, that's what happened. That's what. No.
That'll probably be the last mention of the Eagles right there.
We're going to do what we are actually going to do is a breakdown. As exciting as things have been today across sports, particularly, my goodness, Aaron Rodgers back to Green Bay. Russell Wilson is now a Denver Bronco. Heck, even Mike Williams is sticking around with the Chargers. There's lots of stuff going on in football. But what we want to take a look at is draft picks, because a lot of, there's a lot of excitement at the conclusion here of the NBA season, where everybody's going to land in the standings, all that kind of stuff. But it doesn't just matter for the playoffs. It also matters for the NBA draft, which is coming up. So we want to break down, what's on the line in these last few weeks, draft-wise, because that can be really important as well. So we're going to get into that. First, I guess good news. We talked about it a little bit yesterday. Draymond Green, now we've got a date that he's targeting instead of just a range. The date, March 14th. That's the date that he's looking to come back. So about a week, and then Draymond Green back in action for the Warriors, and much needed. We saw last night, they didn't play their guys, still put up a fight, but couldn't get the win.
Yeah, and that's from the man himself said that.
Sources.
No better source than the man to be the source himself. So yeah, it's I think that is you know, good news for them. I mean, they've lost 5 in a
Mhm.
row. It's that's tough. Now they got lucky. Memphis has stumbled just a bit here in their last little, just a bit, but they've closed that gap. Memphis has actually passed them now by a half game for the second seed in the West, and let's see where this goes the rest of the way. But if you're the Warriors, it's not out of the realm of possibility that maybe Utah catches them too. Maybe Dallas, because those two teams have been playing great lately. Dallas has won 5 in a row. Utah lost last night, but they're 7-3 in their last 10, and that's close to now 2.5 games and 3 games for those teams. So the Warriors got to get this slide reversed. Now, I think it's also fair to note Steve Kerr cared so much about it that he didn't even take most of
Mhm.
his regulars to Denver last night for the game. He was basically like, I don't really care. And I think I'm going to very much paraphrase, but he said recently, I do not care about our seed. I care about that we're healthy, rested, and ready to go come playoff
Well,
time.
and as Ron Gutterman broke down for us yesterday, there was a little bit of frustration on the Warriors' part too,
Correct.
that the game was being rescheduled for that point when they were in a pretty heavy portion of the season, and so Steve Kerr's like, "No, you know what? Sorry, we're not going to
Mm-hmm.
bring our guys then. If you're going to make us play
Yep.
at this point, we're not bringing our guys." And
Yep. And that was a makeup
yes, that's
game
what we should know.
from that COVID cancellation earlier.
Uh, let's move on though. Isaiah Thomas. This is something you and I were talking about a little bit. From what we've heard,
Yeah.
apparently he's been trying to get back to the Boston Celtics if he can. We've been in IT's corner all season long, hoping that he can find a spot
Mm-hmm.
and stick and just be a guy who can play. Because I still think he is an NBA caliber player. I think he's shown definitively whenever he's gone down to the G League that he's too good. He's too good to be in the G League. NBA teams have a challenge making him fit, but I mean, it's almost kind of sad. He's been trying to get back to the Boston Celtics, and it just hasn't quite been working out.
Yeah, it was so the context for this is the Celtics are playing the Hornets tonight. Isaiah Thomas is currently
Yeah.
on the Hornets on a 10-day contract, so he did some media availability this morning. Rare that a player on a 10-day contract would even do media, but it's Isaiah Thomas. He's not your normal 10-day kind of guy, and they're playing the Celtics, and he very much said that over the last few seasons, anytime he's been available and the Celtics have had an opening, he's reached out and said, hey, I'd love to come back. He's been very open about that on social media and the like of, really saying like, hey, I would love to go back to Boston. And, when people will say things like after what they did to you, and he's like, it's not really, about that. It's a business. I get it. But, I think he, very much is like owning his best years were in Boston. And, I mean, this guy made an all NBA, the second team, if I remember
Yeah,
correctly. If not, it was the third team. I mean, he played
he
great
had MVP
for the
consideration at
Celtics.
one
So,
point.
yeah, definitely got a handful of votes at the end of ballots. But yeah, so it's really tough, to see how things have gone. And I thought it was kind of cool for him to be as candid as he was. Of I would love to return to the Celtics. Now from the Celtics side, I think there's a couple things that come into play here. Is one is they haven't always had a need for Udoka was asked directly today,
Mhm.
about IT, and he said we haven't had a need at point guard. I mean, most of the year they had Marcus Smart, Dennis Schroeder, and Peyton Pritchard. Pritchard couldn't get off the bench until they traded Schroeder, so that was already one spot. And then I think the thing that goes unsaid is the way they play defense with their starters, with their backups, no matter who is in there, everyone needs to be able to switch and hold their own. Like it is not a thing at all with that. So it just becomes a thing of it's just really hard to fit him in. But glad he's in Charlotte. I hope he makes it stick. I hope he plays
Yeah.
really really well and he's able to stick. And if the right opportunity comes and there's a need, I would love to see him back with the Celtics. I just don't think that's anybody's in that position right now. Because the other thing is, Boston can't really bring him back and then not play him.
Hmm.
Like it would just be kind of weird. Then it looks like you're pandering and those kind of things. It just is. I just don't think you really want that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. Hopefully he does wind up sticking with the Hornets because again, I'm saying I think he's an NBA player. He should be somewhere. Where the best spot
Mm-hmm.
is, we're not sure. Maybe that'll be Charlotte. We'll see.
Yeah,
Um, Zion, let's talk about him. Back in New Orleans
yeah,
now. Keith, you wrote a piece for Spot Track all about the different options that the Pelicans will have. contractually with him, what they can actually do. And this is going to become, I think, as we get closer and closer to the time of year for this, this is going to be a bigger story. What do you do with Zion contractually? I mean, do you just, hey, he's really good when he's playing, so here's a full max deal? I mean, how comfortable are the Pelicans with that? Can you go the other way? I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see how they handle this. And Keith, you did a great job breaking down what the options really are.
Yeah, you guys can go read the piece. It's at Spot Track, and I called it the complicated case of Zion Williamson's next deal. And the challenge is we've never seen anything like this. He's played 85 games. I'm going off the assumption he's not going to play this year. And if he does, it's probably more of a cameo type thing. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't play 85 games, but those 85 games were amazing. Last year, in a mostly healthy season in his second year, he was 27-7-4. Like, insane.
On like 95% from the field.
That's exactly what it felt like. Yeah. Exactly. So it is really, at a point when you look at this of, those are no-brainer max, full max, probably designated player language, numbers. But the problem is it's 85 games over 3 years. And that's fully owning. There's been a couple shortened seasons in there. They weren't that shortened. They weren't shortened enough to play basically one full season in 3. So what I did was I broke down all the ideas that are out there of an extension, designated player, what the numbers would look like on those, what would happen if you put some of the Embiid protections in there. It's even been suggested, maybe just signs the qualifying offer. That's got a little twist to it that could make that not really a possibility. So go check the piece out. I'm not going to sit here and read it to you on Front Office Show, because that would be that would put me to sleep as well. But go read it and take a look at it, because I think it'll start to explain. We've never seen anything like this, and even finding a comp to this, I put some comps in at the end of the piece. They're not even clean. It is, pretty messy. So it's just definitely something to take a look at.
Yeah. Going to be really interesting to see what happens from here. And I mean, what Pelicans fans, I don't know. let's hope they can find the right path, because there's a lot. I mean, part of the reason why this is so interesting is because there's a lot hinging on this, right? I mean, you're talking about the future of the immediate future of this franchise hangs in the balance, depending on the health of Zion Williamson and what they ultimately do with him contractually. So we'll see what winds up happening there, but definitely go check out that piece.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah, it's to not oversimplify it. The Pelicans have to get this right. Yep. You blow this one, it could be, and I don't even know what that means, right? To be completely fair, I don't know if that means giving him a max, not giving him a max, trading him, not trading him. I don't know. That's what makes this so complicated. But if you don't get it right, you're in trouble for probably years to come. There's a good chance.
All right, draft pick time.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right, so we're going to break down future draft, or this coming draft, who goes where, what picks are going what. There's all kinds of protections and things like that NBA teams over the years have become more savvy and like, hey, we don't really want to just trade it first. We want to make sure we put some protection on this in case something happens. If it's really good, we want to keep it. Those have become a bigger and bigger thing, which only makes this process all the more complicated. So
I think the way to do this is we're just going to kind of go alphabetically by city. That's how I have it listed out and tracked. And we'll just kind of talk about what they have, what they potentially have. Then using 538's projected standings, which I still think are probably the best measure for now, and that's end of year standings. We'll go through and see what projects to actually convey and what we could be looking at pick wise. So starting with the Atlanta Hawks, they have their own pick, free and clear. Nothing attached to that. They get the Charlotte Hornets pick if it goes 19-30. That came to them through the Knicks. That came via the Kevin Knox Cam Reddish trade. Then they get Oklahoma City's pick if it's 15-30. That's from the I believe, if I remember correctly, that's from the Dennis Schroeder Carmelo Anthony swap a few years back. They're clearly not getting that OKC pick. Probably not going to get the Charlotte pick. Moving on, Boston. They keep their own pick if it's 1-4.
That's not going to happen.
That's not going to happen unless they, completely fall apart here with over the last month and get into the lottery and then move up. That's kind of the, hey, let's protect against, ultimate disaster protections. Otherwise, that pick's going to San Antonio. That's going to be how that goes. Brooklyn gets a little interesting. They do not have their own pick. We'll get into that in the Houston section because it's more tied to the Rockets. But they can take Philly's pick if they want, or they can defer that to 2023.
Which they should.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I was going to say is we were talking about this off air and Trevor and I both agree right now that pick projects to be the 27th pick in the draft. You don't, that's not where you want to be. So what you want to do if you're Brooklyn is take the shot on the upside. If nothing else, it could be way better next year. And there's no kind of protections or anything like that. So, and I'm not wishing this on anybody, but let's say James Harden's like, yeah, this didn't work. I want to go somewhere else. Right. And then Joel Embiid, gets hurt or something and it all falls apart. You could be looking at a lottery pick if you're the Nets.
Yeah. You're essentially, if you take the pick this year, you're locking in at 27 right now, which that's not ideal. Most likely, does it end up 27-ish next year too? Probably, but you at least want to have the opportunity that if something happens there and it doesn't work out, or maybe the chemistry is just. I mean, look, Atlanta was great last year, and then this year they're barely in the play-in. You just never know, and so you want to at least have the possibility out there if you're Brooklyn. And so I think you defer that pick and then think, okay, most likely we probably just get 27 next year, but at least give yourselves the chance to get something better.
Yeah, what's the worst that happens ends up 28, 29, or 30.
What?
Yeah. Okay. It ended up 28, 29, or 30. So the Bulls, this is one of the rare times and one of the last times for, a few years running here that they have their own pick free and clear because they still owe a pick to Orlando. The second first they owe from the Nick Vucevic trade. And then they owe picks later down the line to San Antonio from the DeMar DeRozan trade. So they have their own pick free and clear this year. Then they get Portland's if Portland's is 15-30. So essentially if Portland is a playoff team. Maybe, right? Probably not going to happen, but we'll see. We'll get into where they project to finish in a couple minutes. Cleveland keeps their pick if it's a lottery pick. Otherwise, it goes to Indiana if they make the playoffs. Looking pretty good. Like that'll be a pick that goes to Indiana right now, and that's from the Karis LeVert trade just ahead of the trade deadline. Dallas has their own pick free and clear. Last time that'll happen for a little bit because then they owe the second pick to the Knicks from the Porzingis trade. That one's got some protections on it starting next year. They have their own pick this year. Denver has their own pick. Detroit's pick, this one's kind of funny. They keep it if it's 1-16. Otherwise, it goes to OKC if it's 17-30. So the protection's already kind of funny, right? 1-16 instead of the standard 1-14 lottery. But the Pistons are keeping that pick. Yeah. They're going to be, picking high in the draft. Yeah. Warriors have their own pick. That'll be, likely a pick in the 20s. Then, all right, so Houston. So Houston gets the two most favorable picks of their own pick, Brooklyn, and Miami if it's 15-30. Then the other pick that they don't get goes to the Heat. Okay. So in this case, the most favorable picks are somewhat maybe surprised. Their own, that's not surprising. But the Nets, that is a little bit surprising there. So what they will get is their own, and then in that case, Miami will keep, or Miami will keep their own pick.
Get their pick. Keep their pick. However you want to look at it. Right.
Exactly. So Miami will keep their pick in that case. So then Indiana. We already talked. They have their own pick, but they also get Cleveland. Then we get into the LA teams. Clippers is maybe the most simple conveyed pick. It goes to Oklahoma City. Yep. No protections, nothing attached. Then we get to the Lakers. This one's kind of fun. They get, not for Lakers fans. Yeah, sorry. I should have defined that better. In terms of being a nerd about pick protections. If this pick falls 1-10 and it goes to New Orleans, that's from the Anthony Davis trade. If not, it goes to Memphis if it's 11-30.
From that
That
Steven
was,
Adams trade and
from the
Valanciunas.
Steven Adams swap for Zion Williams and all that stuff that got added
Right.
on there with the protections. That is a change that teams were allowed about probably 5 years ago now. The NBA made a change that you could put protections on picks that weren't your own. Previously, you could only protect your own picks. Now you can protect picks that aren't your own pick. So we'll see where that lands. We'll talk about what the Lakers are projected to do here in a little bit.
Okay.
So now flipping to Memphis, they have their own pick. They'll get that Lakers pick if it's 11-30, and then they get Utah's pick if it's 7-30. The Jazz are going to be 7-30. Miami, we already talked about that in the Houston section. Milwaukee's, this one is just kind of fun because they have their own pick, but it's via Milwaukee to Cleveland to Houston. And this is the one where, if we remember in the PJ Tucker trade, they redid the protections on a pick and when picks were owed to Houston. And they got this pick back in that, which freed them up to trade last year's pick for PJ Tucker. So
I'll admit I've done that in like Dynasty Fantasy Football before, where I trade a pick and then if a couple years down the line I wind up trading back for my own pick. But it's rare that you see it actually play out in real life like this.
Very rare. Yep, definitely. Minnesota has their own pick. New Orleans keeps their pick if it's 1-14. If it's 1-4, they keep their own pick. Otherwise, it goes to Portland if it's 5-14. And if not, it goes to Charlotte if it's 15-30. So in this case, New Orleans had their lottery protected portion of their pick. Which they pick go to Charlotte is from the Devontae Graham sign and trade. Then what they did was with their lottery portion is they kept it if lottery gods shine down upon them and they get a top 4 pick. Otherwise, what they said is Portland, you get it if it's 5-14 in the back half of the lottery. And then of course they get that Lakers pick if it falls 1-10. New York has their own pick. In future years, they'll get a Dallas pick coming, but they only have their own now. Then OKC. So I want to have a bigger discussion here, but let's break it down first. They keep their own pick if it's in the lottery, 1-14. Otherwise, Atlanta, 15-30, gets it. Their pick's going to be in the lottery, so they're going to keep their own pick. The Detroit pick, they're not going to get this year because that's not going to be 17-30. So take that one off the board. They get the Clippers pick, and then they're going to get Phoenix's pick if it's 13-30. It's going to be 13-30.
It'll be 30.
Probably going to be 30. So I want to talk about this here versus waiting until we get into what picks are going to convey and all that stuff. Oklahoma City, if you start looking at it, right, we've all laughed about they've got a billion picks and all this stuff. Their picks don't look all that great going forward. None of those picks looks like an absolute gem moving forward. Clippers look like they're going to be pretty good. They made it through this season. Already pretty solid. Their hope, right, if you're OKC, is they don't make the playoffs, and then in the lottery they get really lucky for OKC, unlucky for the Clippers. That Suns pick, that's 30th. I mean it's an extra pick.
It's something, but
so you're basically looking at probably a top 5 pick for their own pick, a mid-round pick for the Clippers pick, and then the last pick in the draft. In the years going forward, now that Phoenix obligation will be taken away, they get a Washington lottery protected pick. That's not great, right? Because you're talking another pick 15-30. The Detroit pick has weird protections on it, but they'd have to be pretty really good for OKC to get it because the protections actually go up from the Pistons side. And then they get a Denver pick if it's not a lottery pick. That's next season. And they can swap with the Clippers if somehow they end up better than the Clippers. Then you go into 2024, Houston, you get their pick if it's 5-30. You get another pick from the Clippers. There's a Utah pick coming their way. But these are all, again, non-lottery picks. So these aren't great picks, right? This is, where these picks are all of a sudden, they don't look like what they once did. They have a Miami pick coming their way. Again, a non-lottery pick. A Philly pick, if it's not top 6 in 2025, coming their way. So all these picks, other than the Clippers ones, are very heavily protected, or they're protected for the absolute best picks that they could be. So you're basically banking on the Clippers falling apart if you're the Thunder to get real value out of any of these picks.
Now, that's true. None of these picks by themselves are all that valuable, but if you're OKC, what you're looking to do then is probably take some of these picks, package them together, and combine them to try to say maybe move up in a draft, or maybe you get an asset or something like that.
That's what you want to do, but that's what they tried to do last year.
I'm not saying it's easy to do, but
yeah,
that's what you try to do with this.
Yeah. What you got to start thinking about here is, instead of moving up from 15 to 8, you got to think about, all right, the guy we like there on the board at 12. We're going to throw one of these with one of these to move from 15 to 12 or something along those lines. So there's my little mini OKC rant. Yeah, 1 million picks, but they don't look like what they once did. Orlando, they have their own pick last year that they won't have some extra pick coming their way because they've got extra picks coming from both Chicago and Denver down the line. Philadelphia, we already talked. They keep it unless Brooklyn defers, or unless Brooklyn takes it or Brooklyn can defer. Phoenix's pick, we just talked about that in the OKC section. That's going to go to OKC. Portland keeps it if they're in the lottery, looking a little more likely now. And then they get that New Orleans pick if the Pelicans are 5-14. That's from the McCollum trade. Sacramento has their own pick. Probably good because they can't seem to ever stay out of the lottery, no matter what happens in the NBA. And then the Spurs. This one is kind of interesting because the Spurs they're going to have their own pick and have Boston's pick. And unless Toronto stumbles in the play-in and doesn't make the playoffs, they're going to get Toronto's pick too. So 3 picks for the Spurs coming. There's probably be in the 8 to 10-ish range, my guess is. And then Boston and Toronto's picks probably in the late teens, or Celtics probably in the mid 20s.
Something you can use.
Yep. Toronto we just covered. Utah's pick, they keep it if it's 1 to 6. That's not going to happen, so it's going to go to Memphis. And then Washington has their own pick. Then we get in a protected pick that they owe to the Thunder. So there's all your protections. So now what we did was we went through and did the 538 projected standings, and went in and did the basically here's what it'll look like if these teams finish in these spots based off what that 530 is projecting. So what I did was I took it from today, their updated projections. I reversed the order for records. Here's what we would have. First pick, Orlando. Second pick, Houston. Third pick, Detroit. Fourth pick, OKC. No real shocks, right? Order still, and this is, without running a tankathon simulation of the lottery or anything like that, because we could get crazy. We'll have fun with that. Yeah, we'll have fun with that later when we get closer to the draft and everything. But Indiana at 5, Sacramento at 6, Portland keeps that pick. They stay at 7. San Antonio's own pick is 8. Now we get into the first pick that'll change hands. This is the first pick that'll change hands of 9 picks that will change hands off the projected standings. The Lakers pick, we know it's going somewhere. In this projection, it would go to the New Orleans Pelicans at 9. That's good for the Pelicans. Well, let's go 10, New York, 11, Washington. It's good the Pelicans get that Lakers pick because their own pick now, because it falls at 12, projects to go to the Trailblazers. So that gives the Trailblazers the 7th and 12th picks. Doesn't seem super great, right? Because you're a little towards the back end of the top guys. But that's kind of how it was felt about Orlando. Orlando ended up with Jalen Suggs and Franz Wagner last year. A couple higher spots in the draft order, but they made out pretty good there. Charlotte keeps their pick at 13. Atlanta keeps their pick at 14. That's the lottery. So now we're through the lottery teams, and we are now on to the getting into the non-lottery, and this is where a lot of stuff starts changing.
And this is being done by project. I just want to clarify. This is being done by projecting out the remainder. This is not locked in. So don't assume that this is gospel. Yep. This is how it's going to be. So like it's projecting that the Pelicans are going to finish ahead of the Lakers, and maybe that does happen, and that's what the model is projecting right now. So that's what we're giving you. It may not look exactly like this.
Exactly. No, great call out by you. And it's also, this will change,
Hmm.
right? This is not and this
It's
is
a
not
fluid
where the
thing.
standings are today. This is full on projections. So by these projections here, March 8th, Clippers 15, that pick goes to OKC. Brooklyn 16, that pick goes to Houston because Houston
Hmm.
gets the two best of their own, Brooklyn or Miami. Toronto's pick at 17 goes to San Antonio. Cleveland's pick at 18 goes to Indiana. So that's four straight picks, all change hands by these projections. Then we go on a run of teams keeping their own picks from 19 to 23: Minnesota, Chicago, Denver, Dallas, Milwaukee. Then Boston at 24, their pick projects to go to San Antonio. I want to pause here just for a second because I know some people are like, wait, why is Boston's pick so high? 538's models since the trade deadline have been extremely high on the
Hmm.
Celtics. They were trending that direction, but since the trade deadline, they've gone even higher, including, I was telling Trevor this before we started recording, they give the Celtics a 32% chance of making the NBA Finals. That's just making it. That is the not only the best in the Eastern Conference, that is the best in the entire NBA. Then they give them a 19% chance of winning the NBA Finals. Again, the best in the NBA for the Celtics, and project them to finish with a 50-32 record, which would mean for the Celtics, who have 16 games left, that'd be an 11-5 close. Maybe, right? That doesn't seem too
Sure.
absurd to think about. So let's see. The idea of them getting to 50 wins, even as recently as a month ago when they started really playing, well, they started playing well in January, but were really playing well in February. Getting to 50 wins seemed like an absolute pipe dream, but here we are. So just in case anybody's wondering,
Why is
why
that?
are they so far or so? I always struggle. Are they high or
Right.
low in
I
the
know.
draft?
I never
Right?
know how to phrase it.
Why are they right? Why are they in the mid 20s? Then Golden State projected to keep their pick at 25. Utah's 26. That pick would go to Memphis. Philly, Memphis, Miami, 27, 28, 29. And then Phoenix's pick goes to OKC. So using OKC, then now we'll just cover teams with multiple picks. OKC would project to have the fourth pick, the 15th pick, and the 30th pick. Houston would project to have the second pick and the 16th pick. Portland, the 7th and 12th. Let's see, where are we going next? The Indiana Pacers, the 5th and 18th pick. San Antonio Spurs, the 8th, 17th, and 24th pick. Memphis Grizzlies, the 26th and 28th picks. So there we are. There's gives you a little sense of what's to play for the rest of the way. You can find the best place, I think, publicly to find draft picks
Hmm.
owned and owed information is on
Yeah.
Real GM. If you go to their ribbon, it's called GM Laboratory at the top. Click on, or just hover over that. Click on Team Summary, or Yearly Summary, whichever you care for, under Future Draft Picks, and you will see all this information laid out there in incredible detail, all the way through as far out as picks have been eligible to be traded so far.
So,
So
I mean, important to note because all of this stuff, this is stuff that teams are watching in addition to the standings, just looking at where they are in the table. They're
yeah,
looking to see where they're going to rank, but they're also looking at, hey, what are we going to have draft pick wise? Because that's going to be a big
yep,
influence on what they can do in the offseason. Not necessarily that they're going to use all these picks, but there's a lot of teams that are thinking, hey, if I get this first round pick, that gives me another trade asset that I could use. If the Pelicans wind up getting the
yep,
Lakers pick, okay, that's another thing that you can put into a deal if you decide, or maybe you find a player that you really want there. There's a lot that's going to be at stake here beyond just seeding for the playoffs that's going to play out over
mm-hmm.
the next few weeks.
Same thing. Like, look at Portland.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're a really good example, right? And I think New Orleans is another one. Teams that are trying to win quickly, right? They're not Orlando, Houston, Detroit, OKC, who are locked into long-term rebuilds. They're trying to flip that. If you're Portland 7 and 12 and somebody becomes available, you can now all of a sudden maybe be a player in those trade talks, because you would say, hey, we've got the 7th and 12th picks. What do you think about that for player X to come in here and be a part of what we're building around Damian Lillard? Same thing, New Orleans, great call out, right? They're obviously trying to win. So, hey, we've got the 9th pick in the draft. What do you think? You guys interested? And, those are things that will, happen and move. And then, of course, OKC, even though I'm not super high on their picks, they do have the ability to start bundling a bunch of stuff together if it's to move up and down the board and things like that.
It's part of what makes, if the Lakers and Pelicans are 9-10 in the play-in tournament, it adds that extra layer of drama, right? Because the Pelicans could be potentially knocking the Lakers out and knocking themselves into a draft pick, depending on what happens there. So
it's crazy, right? I mean, look back at the bubble. Mike Muscala hit that jumper, which then gave that pick to Philly, which turned into Tyrese Maxey, who's now a key player for them as they try to chase the title this year. So this stuff does matter, but we knew on a slower news day we wanted to pop in and give a kind of a pick protection primer and just talk about hey, here's where we're at with all these picks, and hopefully it gives you a good setup of what to look for over the last month of games. It's crazy. There's only a month left in the regular season. Like where the season is just chugging along, but it's heading towards what should be an awesome playoffs.
It's funny you say there's only a month left. Lakers fans are like, oh my God, there's a month left.
There's a month left. Oh man,
that's all right. It is. I'm excited about the NBA playoffs in general. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on around the league, and thankfully I get to come over here and cover it with all of you, which is nice. Perfect. All right, everybody. I think that wraps things up for today. Appreciate all of you joining us. Again, answer that question in the comments down below. Who is the MVP this season? Let us know your thoughts. And don't forget, subscribe right here to the NBA Front Office YouTube channel if that's where you're watching this. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, make sure over on Apple Podcasts, toss us a 5-star rating and give us a review. I love going in there and reading the reviews. So give us a review over on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Till next time, everybody. See ya. And stay safe.